Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg.
I'm Emily.
And we're going to talk about the next in our Robert A. Heinlein series. This is his 10th published work, best known as Magic Inc., which is how it's been published in most of the book collections that Heinlein has done. Its original publication was in Unknown magazine in September 1940 under the title The Devil Makes the Law.
Which is how I read it.
Right.
From the original PDF. Well, a PDF facsimile of the original.
Right.
That we found online.
Yeah, which you can find online pretty easily. Otherwise, it's getting a little bit hard to find Robert Heinlein because it's all tied up in that big Virginia collection. So the regular publishers, aside from his most popular works, are not keeping him in print. So the only way to find a lot of this is in used books or in the PDF of Unknown. Anyway, Unknown magazine was the fantasy companion to Astounding Science Fiction, and it was edited by John W. Campbell Jr. And he did publish quite a large number of really groundbreaking fantasies. Mostly Unknown specialized in the early form of what we today call urban fantasy.
Yeah.
Where you have modern settings, modern people, modern cities, but wizards or
magic of some kind.
Magical creatures, fairies, or gnomes, or what was trouble with water? It was a water sprite. This guy's fishing and he catches a water sprite and gets into magical trouble. Unknown really specialized in that brand of fantasy and really created that type of fantasy back in 1939 through like 1943, I think.
So those who love Holly Black, you owe it to Heinlein.
Yeah,
and
the
some of the
original
unknown
sources
authors.
of that. Robert Heinlein, L. Sprague de Camp, Herbert L. Gold, Fletcher Pratt, authors like that are the ones that really started that back then. Though you could trace it all the way back to at least H.G. Wells with The Wonderful Visit, where this farmer sees an angel crash into a cornfield and rescues it and gets it
tries to get it back
and
to health and stuff.
tries to get it to understand the modern world. And it's hilarious.
Who would? No one can.
And most of these in Unknown were done with a certain amount of humor, and I think Heinlein was kind of using a satirical humor here as well.
He really was, for sure. But yeah.
Okay, I'll let you do the synopsis.
All right, so the synopsis, this is a really detailed work. It is a novella. It's one of the longer ones. And so it's basically a gentleman who owns a contracting business. He does building, and he supplements all of his building supplies with magic from local wizards in his area who are pretty reputable. But the entire story is just a series of unusual obstacles that he faces as a small business owner. The first one being a gentleman comes and threatens him saying, hey, weird things are going to start happening. You're going to get a bad stream of bad luck if you don't pay for our protection. So this is kind of how it all starts. And so it's he and his buddies getting together trying to problem solve all of these issues that they're running into when he's trying to run a business that has supplementary magic-based things. So, like, in his business, some of the concrete gets reinforced by magic. You can get good luck charms put on the boards used for your house. You know, trucks that have fuel efficiency magic and all that kind of stuff. So that's how he conducts his business. But it starts with, of course, this mob kind of mentality with this guy offering protection. Then it starts leading into local businesses getting regulated in some fashion or manner. You get introduced to a colorful array of characters, including the entire Chamber of Commerce for this community, which was hilarious and very satirical. A lot of fun, witty jabs at each other. Then it goes to a national level where some laws are being made, where this company called Magic Inc. is basically trying to monopolize the use of magic in the industry, which is fine for large businesses who can afford really high rates for magicians to help with their stuff, but it does not help the little guys. So there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of wit, but there's also a lot of detail. There's a bunch of nuances that you really have to pay attention to in this story. I had to kind of reread certain parts to make sure I was fully understanding it, but it's just a really lovely array of characters and written in such a witty and fun way that you don't get bogged down too much by the politics of it. It kind of all propels into something that it's all relevant. It all ends up being relevant in the end. Every little piece of it leads into the next and the next. So the politics of it end up actually just being the propulsion of the story, and the rest of it is just a delight. So I really enjoyed this one. I wouldn't call it top tail because it is such a heavy read.
Yeah.
I didn't think it's not for everybody. Like, this is not a everyman's story. It's clever. It's delightful. There are plenty of people who would not enjoy this. I certainly did, though. I liked it. It was very witty.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
I wasn't quite sure how to take it. If this was a fantasy story where Heinlein kind of took the middle of it and tried to give you a lesson in American government, or if it was a story making satire of American government that he used a more fantastic
example
framework to make his point wittier and more absurd.
Yes.
But it really is, it very much is a clear-cut condemnation of our government process and how somebody trying to get something, how big corporations can sneak these things through, and somebody trying to stop it will get nowhere because there are all these avenues the corporation knows how to use to get around anything that anybody tries to use to block
and if you
it.
have a well enough paid lawyer, you can get away with just about anything.
Yeah.
And who's somebody who knows the laws in and out.
And so you could take all of the fantasy elements in this story and turn them into real world type corporations, turn it into an Ford Motor Company instead of Magic Incorporated, and
you'd have a pretty similar
write the same story. But then, of course, you risk lawsuits from companies who see themselves reflected in your story. And so I kind of think that's why Heinlein did this as fantasy, inventing this corporation that couldn't possibly exist. Because then, number one, he gets to criticize the U.S. government process.
It's not even just the U.S. government itself. It's at every level of government, because we start with local. We go. It's every level of hierarchy, and the absurdity of some of the requests and some of the stipulations put on small businesses specifically, which many of us can relate to, because many of us are small business owners in the United States who have to deal with all this red tape.
Right. And then, well, of course, ultimately it goes way beyond government involving the devil. This one character is revealed to be Satan, or not Satan himself, but
devil, a demon of some kind.
A demon. And the other characters actually go to hell and meet Satan and try to fight on that battleground. Anyway, I
it's
think
like
that's
money
just,
being the root of all evil.
Yeah, I think that's just Heinlein kind of saying that, yes, it is evil that is driving a lot of the processes in our country that are causing the corporations to be able to control things and the average guy to keep getting screwed.
Yes. And it's always the little guy who does get screwed in a lot of our government processes, simply because you need enough funds. And as small businesses, you sometimes are living hand to mouth for a little bit, or like starting up is very, very, very difficult because you are running against such large corporations like Amazon and Walmart. I had a frog in my throat there. A capitalist one. But yeah. And
while Heinlein wasn't exactly anti-capitalist,
no,
he was
wasn't.
very right-wing, but he was right-wing in the libertarian way, where he wanted less government.
Yes.
He wanted government to stop screwing all the small businesses and let them do what they can to get ahead, because there is this system that kind of does reward the ones that already have it all, and everybody trying to get even just a small piece of that pie keeps getting pushed down by the system.
Yes, and what that ends up becoming is that a lot of small town America ends up getting destroyed, because small town America runs
Yeah.
on the small businesses that maintain it, because like, I mean, our town is a pretty sizable town, and we
Mhm.
have a lot of amenities, but most of our amenities in our town are privately owned.
Mhm.
We don't have a lot of big corporations that run things here.
Mhm.
Even at least one of our grocery stores is a privately owned grocery store, out of the two major ones we have here in our town.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into more agricultural areas, that's becoming even more and more of a phenomenon as well. You're running into these small towns that have these little guys who are just trying to help make life work, and these agricultural communities that end up getting destroyed because these big corporations come into 20 minutes away, and suddenly everybody has no choice but to start driving that extra 20 minutes to have the convenience of being able to do one-stop shopping.
Mhm.
And it's because of the deterioration of the small businesses that were basically on your main street
Mhm.
back in the day, and sometimes still are, but a little bit more infrequently, I think, in modern America. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a commentary of how American government itself deconstructs small town America.
Yeah.
And it does it so intentionally and with such purpose.
Well, I don't think it's the government in general that is responsible for that. I think it's the people in our society just looking for ways to get around the rules of government and get what they want. And some of them have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, and now they control things.
Yes.
And so then they are in a position where they can push a lot of things out, but they can only go so far, and then the government steps on them and says, you're creating a monopoly. Amazon is dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
They're being called a monopoly, and they might get forced to be broken up like AT&T did.
Yeah.
So you can't go too far when you're in that position. You have to walk a fine line between having that control and stepping over that line where all of a sudden the government is looking at you as a monopoly, and now you might lose all that control. So they aren't, you really can't point your finger to one place as the root of the problem. It's
far
all these
too complex
that are allowing this situation to be created, and nobody is really in control of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this story really does well, I think, pointing things out, is that this is a constellation problem. Like, this is spread out, and like everything they're doing is running on what seems like a wild goose chase, because they're literally just running to the next problem, trying to prevent this, to get a solution for this, and then there's another problem, so they have to run into that as well. And so it kind of gives you that perspective of, this is such an intricate web of decision making, and not everybody who's writing the laws knows what they're doing. Like, a lot of laws are being suggested, or addendums being added to other things. I love that part of when there's lawmaking where the bill that was originally written got completely cut, but then added to a different bill which got voted in approval, which then made Magic Inc. was official and was starting to basically monopolize the magic world. And that happens all the time in government. So very interesting way. Like you said, I love how it's like he didn't want to get sued, so he just went for like this really absurd variant of a story that basically is just having a social commentary on how governmental practices and laws are made and things in the United States. So yeah, it's a good story, but it is very detailed, and I can understand. It's a great poli-sci. Like, if you're a poli-sci person, this is a great story for you.
Yeah, there was a whole long section of it that I felt like I was in American government class being lectured to.
Right back there.
Which a lot of people won't like that.
Yeah. It gets a little dry for some people.
It was show not tell, but it was still going through the whole American government process, and I'm thinking, like, I know this.
I'm just a bill.
Can we just
yes, I'm only a bill. Do you remember Schoolhouse Rock? Yeah. Yeah, I felt like I was watching an episode of Schoolhouse Rock. And it would have been legit, too, because they probably would have used stuff like this.
Yeah.
So, but it is also kind of cool that this also makes it kind of approachable for kids or young adults to kind of have this experience and this educational understanding, but also get that social commentary. So I think this is a really interesting way of approaching the subject.
Yeah. And well, and I think the reason it can't be a top tale is because it's going to be contrary to too many people's politics, you know, because Heinlein was libertarian, which is right wing, and there's a lot of people that are just going to go, and I don't buy that.
And I think the dryness, it is, there are some points where it is like reading a textbook, and if you're into that kind of thing, which I tend to be, like I loved The Silmarillion by Tolkien because it was like reading a textbook or like reading a book on myth.
Something like that, you know, most people complain about it, but you know, it's only a bad thing if you're not interested in the subject. Like me, I find when science fiction goes off on an explanation of science, I love that.
Yes, I like details.
Most people hate that.
I am a person too who also enjoys being over communicated too. Yes, absolutely info dump on me and everything. But a lot of people are not. A lot of people just want something that is thoughtless, mindless entertainment. Yeah. This is not thoughtless, mindless entertainment.
No.
You have to think, there are parts I reread to make sure I really understood it. And that's not for everybody. So that's why I don't think it's a top tale. It's just too heavy.
Yeah.
And not like emotionally heavy.
You could argue
headspace
that
heavy.
Because it's so controversial, because it's potentially something that would create big arguments, that maybe should be considered a top tale.
I mean, we could argue that for sure. And I think there's nothing wrong with questioning capitalistic structures, because in some cases it can be toxic, because nothing made by imperfect humans is going to be perfect.
Right.
So I think this is a great story to kind of get that headspace. So, ooh, now you got me.
But I think
significance-wise,
I think from Heinlein's perspective, being very right-wing, he wasn't really criticizing capitalism. What he was criticizing is the people who take advantage of the loopholes.
Yes. Yes.
You know, well, that's why it was titled,
I think I say
The Devil Makes the Law.
Yeah, I think that's why I say capitalism now, though, because we are now living, presently watching that happen.
Right.
We're watching people do this constantly, and there's no letting up
right,
of it.
and it's only because there are certain people who want to just run rampant with their own personal selfishness.
Yeah.
Rather than have any kind of social conscience to what they're doing to the larger society. And that's kind of why Heinlein titled this The Devil Makes the Law. Because those people, it's kind of suggesting those people are following the devil.
And there's also a lot of devil in the detail in this story too, so I thought it was kind of a double entendre with the title The Devil Makes the Law.
Right.
But what do you think? Should we flip a coin? Goodness. Should we have the public vote on whether we put this as a top tale or not?
I don't know. If we could get enough responses, people telling us.
You guys want to vote on it?
You
want to vote and decide?
Let us know.
Yeah, read it and vote.
I'm kind of torn. I didn't love the story.
Yeah.
The way I love some of the others that we've read by Heinlein, but because it's something that does piss you off.
Maybe it's good. I mean, we kind of did that last time too. Like, I can't remember what story it was specifically where I put it as a top tale because I understood culturally its significance, and I can't remember what story that was. It was so many ago. Maybe it was Wuthering Heights. I think it was Wuthering Heights we put as a top tale, but I hated it so much because
I know you hated it, but I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
I mean, it's a good story. It's just frustrating. So, I mean, this is kind of a similar thing.
Except this is more politically and philosophically relevant.
Which I think makes it much more important.
So, from that angle, I mean...
You vote! Cause
so many people, I hear all the time on BookTube, people putting down Heinlein because they don't agree with his politics. Well, democracy moves forward by listening to people that you don't agree with. We have to listen, and we have to have intelligent conversations where we have open minds to opposing viewpoints. That's how democracy
and how do you strengthen your view?
Work. Yeah.
If you don't hear the opposition. But yeah, I'd say let's put it in a top tale.
Okay.
I think it has such philosophical and political significance. And another thing I want to say too before we get too far, with that conversation, or much further with that conversation. I love the portrayal and respect towards African Americans in this story, considering its time, and the respect towards women who are working. Not like working women as in like streetwalkers and stuff, but women who are single, who have businesses. Really, really well done. And a little bit more progressive than I would expect to see for something that was written during this time, which I appreciated a lot. It was really good.
And the witch was kind of interesting. She was an old woman, but for a while she transformed herself into a young, beautiful woman. And that just kind of blew this guy's mind.
And that female politician, senator or whatever she was, that was really cool. Because, like, what year was this? Was it the...
1940.
1940, that's what I thought. I thought it was the 40s. So, yeah, it was very progressive. It already had some civil rights commentary in it as well, which I thought was good. But yeah, so that was stuff I wanted to point out in this as well, because Heinlein made some big statements for his time in those portrayals, which I thought was really good. Again, reinforcing the idea that not all science fiction and fiction written by straight white men was all about...
Well, there's the people who are making assumptions about classic science fiction. The more I am digging deep into the classics, the more I'm realizing that they just don't know what they're talking about.
No.
Because I just finished Shadow on the Hearth by Judith Merrill, woman author, 1950. Her third published work, it's a book. She published a novel with Doubleday. It's about aftermath of an atomic war, and it focuses on a woman. Her husband is in New York, working in New York City, and New York City got bombed. So she doesn't know if he's even alive. So it's her and her two daughters and her maid, black maid, 1950. That was common back then. So, but this black maid was not shown as a stereotypical black servant. She was a strong woman with a bit of a mouth on her and a bit of an attitude. It was incredible. It was an amazing story, and it just contradicts everything that people talk about with classic science fiction being racist and male-centric. And I mean, yes, there were stories like that, but you can't just write it all off.
No.
If you're not finding that, you're not reading the right stories.
And I think the fact of the matter is, too, just because something was popular doesn't mean it was good.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean it actually reflects the actual ethics of the time or the actual people in the genre writing. And I think that I had come into this kind of with that preconceived notion that there was a lot of misogyny, and there is. It happens. But I'm finding more and more as we're reading through a lot of this classic science fiction and fantasy that there's a lot more progressive.
In this story, Heinlein kind of makes fun of the guy's misogyny. When because this ancient old woman transforms herself to look like a beautiful young woman, and so he's getting the hots for her, and he's all conflicted about that.
Buddy, why are you being so lovey today? You're so lovey today.
And so he's all conflicted about that, and Heinlein is kind of pointing fun at that character at that moment with using that he's seeing this illusion and getting wrapped up in this illusion that he knows doesn't exist.
It is kind of funny.
That's almost like a side bit criticizing that part of our society. And I also think the deep respect that he had for the witch smeller, who was the African American man, who was a doctor, and he was well versed in his craft, and it was, as an author, he recognized the importance of ancestry to the culture and the importance of belief and strength and integrity and being in touch with your primal self and tribal self, as well as your sophisticated self, and seeing yourself as a whole person. And that's what I appreciated about those passages, is he saw this man not just as a black man, even though it was the most obvious thing about him, but when he saw him work, he had an appreciation for him as a whole person, and all his knowledge and all his ancestral knowledge and the ties he had to his origins and the strength and power he had in what he did. So I really appreciated those aspects of things. We're gonna hear Kat sniffing on our
sniffing on the microphone a little bit. So if y'all hear sniffing, that's just Constantine. Very interested. Yeah, you're very interested in everything we're doing. It's like you have been. It's really funny that he's doing this because he has been like the laziest, like most disinterested cat this entire snowed-in weekend. And now suddenly he's like, "Oh, things are happening."
New person.
Yeah.
And I'm ignoring him.
Yep. Which drives him nuts. So now he's acting a fool. He's acting a fool. But yeah, it's just funny. Cats are hilarious.
Okay, so let's wrap up Magic Incorporated.
Top tail.
We'll put it as a top tail, but we want to hear your thoughts. Leave comments. If you've read Magic Incorporated, what did you think? Comment about Heinlein in general. And hopefully you like this video.
Yeah.
Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Come on back. We'll have plenty more Robert Heinlein. His next work is going to be a full novel. It might take a little bit to get to that. A novel called Sixth Column, also known as The Day After Tomorrow.
I love The Day After Tomorrow.
But you could take...
It's not the same.
You could apply that title to any story.
Yeah.
That lasts for more than one day. You know, it's
whole 48 hours later.
It's such a... what's the word I'm looking for?
Basic.
Well... It doesn't describe anything.
Yeah. It's basic.
It just tells you that it's going to happen sometime after today.
Yep. It's going to happen tomorrow.
Which I say could apply to almost every story ever written.
Yeah.
So I like Sixth Column better as a title. Anyway, we'll be reading that and recording that as our next Heinlein video, but we'll be doing lots of other authors. In the meantime,
So thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you next time.